Professor Brunbauer, how do you evaluate the French proposal for a negotiation framework for North Macedonia?
I found it actually surprising because on the one hand, it was France that for quite some time has been blocking the opening of negotiations with Macedonia and also other West Balkan countries now coming up with this proposal in the last second of their presidency of the European Council. And I think it is plainly speaking not a very good proposal because in a way it awards Bulgarian obstruction. Bulgaria has not paid any political price for its veto, which has nothing to do with Macedonia. It's just a result of the Bulgarian obsession with Macedonia. And now it would be again up to North Macedonia to change its constitution, whereas it didn't cause the problems. It is really something that Bulgaria must settle with itself. So therefore, I think it's not really a workable solution. Also because it doesn't include any guarantee that Bulgaria doesn't invent other sort of fake problems which it might use to veto the opening of negotiations with Macedonia. And last thing to say, this proposal would make a purely bilateral problem, which has nothing to do with the criteria a country needs to fulfill to become member of the European Union, part of the negotiation process, which is a really very dangerous precedent.
Yes, you mentioned a couple of times, even in your presentations before, that it's a dangerous precedent in this proposal. Why dangerous? What will mean in the future? I'm not talking about only for negotiations for Macedonia.
Yeah, let's take, for example, the most recent potential candidate for European Union membership, Ukraine. So at the moment, of course, Ukraine enjoys a lot of support. And we do hope that at some moment Ukraine can really negotiate for membership in the European Union. And then hypothetically speaking, one of its neighbors, which shares also problems with the way history is interpreted in Ukraine, could probably do the very same thing as Bulgaria did nowadays. So problems are invented, the problems become part of a European negotiation process, which are not rooted in the Copenhagen criteria. And we know, I mean, in the Balkans, but also in Eastern Europe, that many countries have this sort of bilateral historical issues about cultural identity, and all of that should not become a matter of European Union decision making, but really keep it bilateral and but don't make it part of a negotiation process. It opened the doors to all kinds of blackmailing the European Union by countries that are already part of the European Union.
At this moment, in North Macedonia is debating whether the proposal should be rejected or accepted. What is your advice? What will be gained if the proposal is accepted? What might happen if the proposal is rejected by Skopje?
It is not up to me to make any advice and recommendation to Macedonian policy makers. I mean, obviously, the potential gain might be that Bulgaria might lift its veto now. But of course, we don't know whether they can come up with something similar in a year or so, or when they feel that there's no progress on the implementation of the Friendship Treaty of 2017. So we don't know. I mean, I think the problem is, and this France really didn't take into account that these questions, like the question whether another nationality should be explicitly mentioned in the preamble of the Macedonian constitution. These are really very important and hotly debated questions in a country, and you just cannot simply dictate to a country, you need to accept this compromise. You have to reckon with the controversy, and this is what we are seeing. What we are seeing now in a situation that was volatile enough, even without these current protests and demonstrations. So what I do hope is that policymakers in Macedonia across all different political parties do find some consensus how they respond in a European way. They should set an example and maybe also show to their neighbors in the East that you can have a European approach to these kind of questions.
My last question, Professor Brunbauer, is can we expect a better proposal for North Macedonia in future, because we are waiting for 2 decades for open negotiation.
Yeah, this is what I really don't know. It is really a very sad story, and certainly not something the European Union, although it is not Brussels to blame, but really the member states can be proud of. Macedonia has done also so much, and North Macedonia even changed its name. I think this has never happened in international relations, and really also implemented a lot of reforms. So maybe again it comes down to North Macedonia having to accept, in a way, a bad compromise, just for the sake of finally starting negotiations. But I still think it's not a very good idea. But as the weaker country in this sort of constellation, in this context, probably it's the only alternative that Macedonia has, because without the breakthrough now, I don't see when negotiations really can begin, because Bulgaria, I mean, they will enter into a new election period, and we don't know what the government will look like, the next Bulgarian government, but it could well be more populist, more right-wing than the last one, and which would make things even more difficult for North Macedonia.